Hello and welcome to the program. It's one of those special days that I'm out of the studio for a special reason. I came to visit the local MEC and Minister of Transport, Donald Grant. We know that it's December, there's lots of road accidents and lots of things happening that should not be happening on the road, and he's here to talk to us about that and how not to get involved in road accidents and all the things that go wrong on the road. Minister, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I know that this time of the year you have a challenging task ahead, and we see the festive season coming, and the transport department is one of the most busiest departments because there's lots of things happening on the road, and all South Africans are aware of that. Now, you've also recently been running many other campaigns against level crossing and some of the safety around that, bus vandalism and a range of others. Being the transport MEC in the Western Cape, how do you feel at this time, especially when you know the challenges are now on top of you?
Well, I know that we've planned as adequately as we have, but we are still well aware of the challenge that awaits us over the next month and a half or so, and we're concentrating in 5 areas. The one issue that we are going to crack down heavily on is drunk driving. Pedestrian safety is one of the top 5 at a number 2. Speed, and we are going to be launching a new average speed over distance leg between Lanesburg and Taos River shortly. And then the awareness around road safety and safety, and it's going to be a busy time. The long distance taxi operators, so we're working closely with Santaco and other partners in public transport to try and reduce the number of smashes. Because my biggest problem is the cost of, it's not only the cost, I'm not talking only the economic cost, we don't factor in the human cost at what it's costing this country. And the National Minister estimates the number of people who are dying on our roads to be around about 17,000 nationally in 2013. And I know my predecessor since 2010 has been working hard to reduce the number of fatalities in the Western Cape, and has succeeded in doing so with our Safely Home campaign, down to about 30% of the levels. So it's come down from over 1,700 in the Western Cape down to basically 1,216 in 2013.
I think that's a considerable drop. Do you think that the reason for that is the campaigns that you're actively running? Also, at the same time, do you think that the public plays a role in getting that numbers down?
We do need the public's support, there's no doubt about it, and the fact that ours is the only province with declining rates over a period of time, one needs to look at trend data to see whether campaigns are working or not. But the biggest thing is to try and change behavior. So the other important issues, for example, a simple thing like buckling up. You know, it takes a second to save a life. And our communication campaign out, not only through the media, but also through our signage on board our freeways, all of those helped about taking responsibility for what happens on the roads.
I know recently you commented on the South African actor that's been in an accident, and there was an issue about buckling up there, and I think that was an example to many people.
It was a frightening example, especially from the dashboard camera mounted by another motorist, and sadly we went to see his mother yesterday afternoon in Guguletu and to sympathize with the family. And you know, it leads one to believe that seat belts are very, very important. Of the number of children who end up in smashes outside the car, they become a projectile if they're not wearing a seatbelt in the back of the car. So therefore, we've had a number of workshops with Professor Sebastian van As of Red Cross Children's Hospital who has to deal with the consequences of what happened to those little people when they are involved in a smash. And obviously our job is trying to prevent that from happening. So looking at our planning going forward, that's going to be an important consideration, that in transport in our department, that we pull all the threads together to make sure there's synergy and alignment between financial support to what we want to see happening, and that is to prevent smashes rather than to actually deal with the consequences of it. And it is expensive to try and change behavior and to prevent it. But in most of the models that we've looked at, the cost is about a third of what the 2/3 would be in dealing with the consequences. And in South Africa, that cost is 306 billion rand. And in the Western Cape economy, it's estimated at 21 billion for the 1,216 who died in 2013. So it's a massive budget that we have to pay, and the other departments pay it in terms of community safety, health, social development, education. The bill is shared amongst all the other departments in government. So therefore it's our job to try and reduce the number of smashes. So in other words, where we're looking at our program, I don't want our traffic people just to be concentrating on taking pictures of speeding motorists. I want them to be in the areas where we've got data that there are a number of smashes. So in other words, I want a far more scientific and management focused, based on solid data, to help our planning with technology to reduce the number of smashes. That's what we need to be doing going forward to further reduce the number of people dying on our roads.
You have a very interesting approach to the way that you're actually saying it, because you are saying that you're going through a scientific approach for that. And I think that's very important, because it's all based on numbers. Talking about numbers, when one looks at the fatalities, especially in the Western Cape, are they related to a mixture of drunken driving, recklessness, speeding? And when you look at that data, how do you approach that as a general whole or as per the numbers that's coming out there?
Okay, let's first break it down into the number of pedestrians. Currently for the year to date,
That's something we forget about.
It's massive, because it's 44% of the total number that we've lost so far.
That's an astonishing figure, because
in the calendar year.
Yes.
And it's not astonishing when you're at a workshop and you basically have SANRAL together with the City of Cape Town and Province working together in one traffic centre where we've got CCTV cameras monitoring our roads. And in one area, we've counted the number of pedestrians walking on our roads and freeways. Now, freeways are a no-go area for pedestrians. 28,000 per month were walking on our roads. They've even done research on it, and they find when they approach those pedestrians, who are obviously breaking the law, why are you walking across the freeway? Well, for them, sadly, it's the shortest distance between 2 points.
Correct, yes.
So human nature kicks in. Secondly, they find that if they have to travel or walk through their neighborhoods, they find that dangerous. Thirdly, if they are traveling through their neighborhoods to get to pedestrian access over a freeway, they find that sometimes there are Tutsis or gangsters who extract payment as a toll for them to cross that bridge to get to where they want to go.
That's a new dimension.
So it's a terrible indictment on the system. And we've got to fix that system. We've got to make sure it's safe for people to cross freeways where they need to cross freeways. So in addition, as a consequence and the reality of having pedestrians on our freeways, we have to now educate drivers to be on the watch for pedestrians who are walking on freeways. And it's become far too commonplace in South Africa. And it also puts other motorists who are at risk if someone has to suddenly slow down to avoid or potentially avoid someone who's walking on the side of the road. Because then there can be rear-ended with consequences for a number of people.
Correct. Now, we know that in many instances that we have situations where we have a law that's in place, but the implementation of the law might be a problem, and the prosecution that goes down the line when something does happen might not be that solid. How do you plan to put more focus on that? So if someone gets caught as a drunken driver, that they actually really get through the process and come out on the other side with some level of charges or some level of criminal record or something to keep them at bay? Because if we relaxed on the laws, we might have a problem.
You're absolutely right. There are three things we're doing. Unfortunately, we lost the Drager case, which is technology helping us to get people into court more quickly, because justice delayed is justice denied.
Correct.
But nevertheless, we are continuing with alternative technology to have it tested and to educate our traffic officials and to work with the National Prosecuting Authority together with the Justice Cluster to ensure that when we do roll out this new technology in the Western Cape, then it's not going to be a problem when we come to a court of law. We also, the blood samples currently are mounting up. There's roughly an 11-month delay from the time of taking a blood sample to receiving the results.
11
months through the National Health Laboratory Services, which is legislated. So we need to change the law and to basically get exemption in the Western Cape from that law to apply alternative technology or means of blood testing. So, for example, we will shortly be talking to other experts in that area from UCT and other institutions to give us advice on how best to proceed to reduce the number of backlogs. Because in the Western Cape government, we also do have a program under community safety, which has a watching brief in the courts to see where cases are thrown out. And for example, you can go to the Manenberg court and find on any given morning there might be, say, 20 or 25 cases for drunk driving being heard in that particular court. And as a consequence of coming back without the necessary blood samples for the second or third time, the magistrates get frustrated and eventually throws out a number of cases. So consequently, there is no consequence.
There's no repercussion. This means that same person goes out with a mentality that says, I got off the last time, so I might as well do what I did previously.
Yeah. And if you look at the statistics in our shadow centers, we test and find about 350 people on an average month who are driving drunk in the Western Cape. And in the peak season, that goes up. In party time, it goes up to about 500. Now, those samples, those blood samples taken at our shadow centers or at hospitals, they then have to go and wait that period of time. So we've got to shorten that time so that there is justice.
Correct. Now, Minister, we know that there is a problem on the road, and you've highlighted that very clearly. Now, going ahead as we head into December and the busy times, especially around New Year's and Christmas and those kind of things, what are some of the key things that people should be looking out for? Taking the family out on the road and deciding to drive to Durban or Johannesburg, what are some of the points they need to look out for to keep their family safe?
Well, I think the important thing is to plan your trip properly. Make sure that if you are traveling long distance that you are rested. Fatigue does play a role in terms of bad driver behavior, falling asleep behind the wheel, trying to go too far too quickly. Of course, having one's vehicles tested to make sure that everything is in order, so that if you need your brakes, you can use them. Being vigilant, driving defensively, and watching out for other driver behavior. There are lots of things people can do to try, and I think when there's additional traffic, to be courteous and also respect the rights of other drivers. Because it's often drivers behaving badly on the roads which solicits a negative reaction from another driver. But you'll find that if you let someone in a traffic queue and you wave them in ahead of you, you might find that might rub off on that driver to say that there is someone who's prepared to be courteous to you on the road. And I think it's just being respectful about the rights of other drivers and behaving properly. And where you've got young children in the car, to set an example to those children, to make sure that you are behaving yourself behind the wheel.
Speaking about behavior, just to digress a little bit, recently, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, I never heard about this term, road rage, and there's an increase at the moment as per the media. What's your thoughts about that?
There are far too many cases. It is a frustration. Our roads are too busy. There's a finite amount of traffic which roads can carry, which means also we've got to look very seriously at our public transport networks and to try and get more people off private onto public transport or onto non-motorized transport. So we've got to look as provincial government to plan more effectively, not only with the City of Cape Town, where 73% of our citizens are, but also in the other local authorities to help them with their integrated transport plans. And that's already in process. We've got a pilot operating between ourselves, City of Cape Town and Drakensberg municipality. And then that in time will shift to probably Stellenbosch, Atlantis area, and also the West Coast Saldanha-Vredenburg area, because they're satellites of the greater metropolitan transport of the hub of the Western Cape.
Now, Minister, I know that you've been talking about a lot of figures and a lot of scientific approaches to different things that's happening, and you've been mentioning how we would be precautionary about certain things. I want to take the discussion one step towards you as Minister. How do you feel, being the Transport Minister in this region, when you wake up in the morning, what is it that you really want to see from drivers out there? We know we spoke about the figures, but what is it that you want to see by the time you go back home at night?
I want to see behavior change, number one, but what brings it home to me every morning is that I get an email which tells me the number of code blues from the previous day.
Is that every day?
Every day, so it's top of mind.
Yeah.
Every day for me and our senior leadership in this department get the same traffic stats, so we get told where the accident happened. Was it a pedestrian? Was it a driver? Was it a passenger? Was it a cyclist? So we know not only that, but we also know where the accident happened, and then we get other data, of course,
around
in terms of drunken driving statistics, and those, we estimate that alcohol plays a role certainly in more than 50% of the cases.
That's a big number.
It is as high as 80% in some areas, but overall we know that 50% in the Western Cape, where there's been a fatality on our roads, alcohol is a player. And that is why the provincial government has, in its new current term of office, we're looking at 5 overarching provincial strategic goals, and one of them is wellness and safety. So ours is a supportive role to the Department of Health and all other departments to put in preventative measures to try and reduce the number of accidents, because we've also logged, we know when those accidents happen, we know what time of the day, what day of the week, and if it's towards the sort of payday blues weekend, then we expect an increase in those number of fatalities. But for me, the crying shame is that we did a road accident fund presentation in October Transport Month with a number of different role players. Obviously, National Department of Transport, SANRAL, the city, ourselves, and all our partners were there. and quite a big gathering. And I asked anyone in the audience who had not been affected by a road smash with death or serious injury, and most of the audience was sitting down. So I sat down at that time and I asked anyone who hadn't been affected to stand up, and no one stood up. So we've all had tragedy in one way or another around roads and road safety.
Great.
And it's time that we all took a good hard look at how we are going to work together to reduce those numbers.
This can be a very emotional call. It's always emotional when it comes to children because of the severity of the injuries. Because of the height of a child, the injuries can be a lot more serious than in that of an adult. They can sustain injuries from chest to head and neck trauma, just based on where the vehicle would collide with their bodies. What is common in South Africa is for adults to jaywalk or cross the road halfway and then the rest of the intersection. And this is how children learn how to cross the road.
A message to the public and also to your staff especially that are out on the road at night, solving all the problems, seeing to the accidents, seeing to those that have been injured, a message to them in conclusion.
Well, I think let's start with our staff and just say to them, obviously they're not going to be spending much time at home with their families over the festive season, and many will be on shifts because we work 24/7, 365, and obviously we are going to be where we need to be to try and reduce the number of smashes. So thank you to all of them and their families for the sacrifice that they're making on behalf of others. But we simply have to make the roads of the Western Cape safer, and we can only do that better together. So I'm appealing to all the motorists and the pedestrians out there and anyone who's on our road network system really to be top of mind in terms of other road users, and not to be selfish, not to be impatient, to take a chill pill and just make sure that they get to where they're going safely.
Very informative discussion with Transport MEC Donald Grant here in the Western Cape to find out about some of the things that we can do to prevent road accidents, and he's given us some very interesting statistics on the current situation with regards to the roads and the fatalities on the roads, and how we can better all contribute as South Africans not to increase those fatalities. Until next time, thank you for joining us, and do stay safe on the road during this festive season. Goodbye.